What's up, ladies and gentlemen of the internet? How are you guys doing? My name is Matt LeGrand, and on this channel, we are always talking about swimming, biking, or running, some sort of triathlon related content. And today we're gonna take a look at a beautiful fitness watch called the Polar Ignite. And I've been using it for about 2 months now. And overall, it's not my favorite watch, but I'll get into what I love about the watch, as well as some of the reasons that I don't think it's a great option for triathletes. Lastly, I'm gonna go over how you can actually win this watch. Okay, quick disclaimer here. I'm reviewing this watch from the perspective of a triathlete. I typically swim, bike, and run, and while I'll occasionally do yoga or Pilates or something like that, it's pretty rare, it's not super common, and my focus is definitely triathlon. And also, let me just say that this watch was sent to me by Polar for the purposes of this review, and while I did not pay for the watch, Polar isn't sponsoring this video, and they don't get to preview any of the footage or anything like that before you guys get to see it on YouTube. And I have a feeling if you watch the video, it'll become fairly obvious within this video that the opinions are very, very much my own and mine alone. However, anytime a company does send me something, I do try to make an effort to pass it along to one of you guys in the form of a giveaway. And I do that just as an attempt to kind of stay less biased, and because I love you guys. And in the case where I really do love a product like the Polar OH1 Plus, I don't mind, turning around after giving one of those away to you guys and just purchasing the product for myself with my own money. Okay, one of my favorite things about this watch is the overall look of the watch and the design of the watch, and that being paired with its ultra bright LCD screen. It has this stainless steel bezel that is rose gold, and I like the gold, I'm not gonna lie, I really like it. I like the way this watch looks, and it has something called dragon glass, which I'm not super familiar with, but I think it's kind of along the lines of Gorilla Glass if you've had that in a smartphone or something like that. I haven't noticed any scratches or any issues with the glass in particular. And the watch weighs 37 grams, which feels pretty light on my wrist. Didn't notice it in particular as being heavy. And the watch face itself is 43 millimeters in diameter, and it's about 8.5 millimeters in thickness. So it doesn't feel too bulky or anything like that. The actual screen on the inside of the glass does have a bit of that bevel to it. I measured it at only 34 millimeters in diameter, so it's not some huge screen on your wrist. And the display itself is super bright and very readable. It's an LCD touch display, and it uses IPS TFT technology. And that just stands for thin film transistor. And this particular variety has a very nice wide viewing angle, and it's very bright. I'd say especially bright indoors, maybe a little less so outdoors. However, having this super bright display means that it does consume more battery life. And the Polar Ignite's display has an ambient light sensor as well, so the display brightness does change automatically, in tuning with the light conditions, whether you're indoors or outdoors or wherever. And like a lot of activity watches these days, the Ignite also has an optical sensor on the wrist that allows it to detect your heart rate, but Polar does a really good job with their optical sensors. In this case, the Ignite is combining a bioimpedance electrode with their optical sensor, and those two technologies just help to give you a more accurate heart rate. And I didn't do a ton of heart rate accuracy testing on this watch, but if it is something that you're concerned about, I would just suggest potentially going with a chest strap or something along those lines, or potentially an optical heart rate monitor that you wear higher up on your arm. And if you purchase this watch, what you'll find in the box is just your normal warranty information in the instruction manual, along with its own proprietary USB charging cable in the watch itself. And the charging cable seems like it'd be one of those cool magnetic straps that you can kind of just place anywhere, and the magnets just kind of snap it into place the correct way. And so that's what I figured when I first put the watch on the charger, and it just didn't end up charging at all. So after a night of not charging, I realized that there is this little red small dot that indicates just how the watch is supposed to line up on the charging pod. And so I was a little disappointed that it didn't just use that kind of magnetic charging piece or any sort of inductive charging. Speaking of battery life, the watch claims 17 hours in training mode and up to 5 days in normal heart rate monitoring and normal wear use. And I've been using this watch pretty much exclusively for the past 2 months. And if anything, I'd say I'd been training less than usual with kind of extra work going on and just kind of living under quarantine. And I would say that I'm not getting anywhere near 5 days of usage, maybe 2 to 3 days or so. And if I were training for an Ironman, I just don't think that I would be able to use this watch. I don't think it would cut it. And I'm not sure if it's really designed for that type of activity. This watch feels like it's really designed for, indoor workouts, gym stuff, and overall battery life just kind of reflects that particular usage pattern. And I'll just say that Polar does make a couple of different series of watches, in particular like the Vantage V watch and the Polar Grit X watch. They're definitely more designed for these types of outdoor activities. So for example, both those products will use a different display, might weigh a little bit more, but they will get a little bit more battery life and definitely are a little bit more readable in direct sunlight. I think that Grit X is supposed to go for something like 100 hours on a single charge, which is absolutely insane. But that Grit X does cost $429. The Polar Vantage V cost $500. So having this Polar Ignite, sitting at $230 definitely makes this more of a budget-friendly watch when it comes to activity watches. And I'll leave a link to where you can actually buy this watch in the description of this video. If you do choose to use that link and it's an affiliate link, I will make a small commission, and that just goes to help support the channel, and I really do appreciate it. It doesn't cost you anything extra or anything crazy like that. And I already mentioned how much I like this screen, at least while you're inside, I like the screen. But another piece that I really like about this watch is the sleep tracking and the nightly report that you get. And it actually will track you through different stages of sleep. It'll also do things like look at your HRV, which I think is a much more accurate way to assess cardiovascular fatigue. And it'll give you 2 pieces of your report. There's what's called an ANS score, and that ANS score just stands for Autonomic Nervous System, which is looking at a few metrics like your heart rate, your breathing rate, and that HRV score. HRV just stands for heart rate variability, and it's a little counterintuitive, but when you're tired from, some sort of strenuous workout, maybe you've done a marathon or something crazy like that, your heart rate has actually less variability, and it has more variability when you're more recovered. And the second sleep score is just called Sleep Charge, which shows overall how well you've slept. And that would show off stuff like the amount of sleep that you've had or any sort of large interruptions. And one cool thing about this watch is it knows your workout history and it knows your sleep status, and the watch can actually provide workouts for you, kind of based on those metrics. And they call it their Fit Spark training guide. And I tend to do a ton of cardio, obviously. So this watch will often recommend things like strength training or supportive training exercises. And these are actually ready-made on-demand workouts that you can do right from your watch. So one of the things that you need to be aware of is that the Polar Ignite's screen will turn off automatically to save battery life until you raise your arm to wake the display. And this isn't great. In addition to that, because the screen is so bright, while you're sleeping, if you move your arm, the watch will potentially light up the room, but you'll quickly figure out to turn on the Do Not Disturb mode, which disables that screen light, and it also disables notifications. And unfortunately, you'll inevitably forget to turn that do not disturb piece off. So the next day when you raise your watch to try and see what the time is, your watch inevitably will not turn on. Then you'll go and have to turn that little do not disturb back off again. And overall, it's just kind of an aggravating process. I just think that the idea of having your watch off when down is kind of a horrible feature for saving battery life. And I know that Apple has done this in the past, and I know that one of their new features is always on. I feel like it's a usability mistake. If I could, I would turn it off and just deal with the crushing battery life, but that's not really an option. You don't have any controls over that feature unless you're doing an activity, and then you can actually set the screen to always on, and you're definitely gonna wanna do that because there's nothing more annoying than having to violently shake your wrist while you're biking just so you can see your metrics. Now, there's not a lot of cycling features on this watch. It doesn't have Ant Plus or anything like that, for example. So there's no way to pair it with any of your Ant Plus devices. In my case, that's a power meter, the radar that I use on my bike, and some of those features that I really, really love to have access to. But it does have GPS, so you'll be able to do all the biking basics, distance and speed and things like that, if that's all that you're after. And the GPS is not the most accurate by any means. I typically don't worry too much about GPS accuracy, but if the watch is telling me that it can report on open water swims, I'd love for it to be able to report on open water swims. I swam open water with this watch about 4 times. Each of those were somewhere under 3 kilometers. And it really only worked 1 out of those 4 times. And the rest of the time it would show me as having swam somewhere under 200 meters. It just flat out didn't work. But I do feel like this is tricky. I love the fact that Polar was bold enough to kind of include open water swimming along with a ton of other activity types. It just feels like Polar isn't holding anything back when it comes to features on their watch. Unlike Garmin, who I really do believe, will hold back an activity type just to sell you a different type of watch. But in this case, in the case of the Polar Ignite, it's just a little disappointing that the open water swimming isn't very functional. And I didn't have the same issues with running or biking with the Polar Ignite, although I will say that elevation is gonna be based on GPS as opposed to an altimeter or something like that, so it may be a little less accurate. So by this point, you probably have a good feeling for what I think of the watch. I do like this watch. I do think that the design is beautiful. I just don't think that this particular watch is designed for triathletes specifically. I really feel like it falls into that general fitness and wellness category, and it's a competitively priced watch. I'd guess that it's probably most competitive with a watch like the Garmin vivoactive, which I have reviewed on this channel, and I'll leave a link to that video review up here. So if you are looking for a watch that has a ton of diverse features, that has GPS, that can help you with sleep tracking and general fitness tracking, this might be a watch to consider. And if you'd like to win this watch, all you have to do is drop below in the comment section and just tell me what kind of activities you're hoping to do this summer. And I'll give you a few weeks, and I'll give the video a little bit of time, and then I'll pick a random comment. I will clean the watch, I'll clean the charger, I'll even clean the box itself with some sort of disinfectants or anything like that, and then I will mail it your way. And if you are into this stuff, and that would be swimming, biking, or running, you can do me a favor by subscribing to the channel and just hitting that notification bell that just allows you to be notified of whenever I post new videos, which I typically post about once per week. All right, guys, thanks again for watching this, and we will see you guys on the next one.